So the video that you're about to watch is of a friend of mine that was taken off out of Seven Lakes a year or so ago, and he almost killed himself. And Dan is doing the interview, but it's just a really quick interview of something that could have gone terribly wrong. It ended up getting Dick to install an autopilot and a G5 and all kinds of other goodies in his airplane to help out in the future. But it's just a quick little reminder that this can happen to any of us on takeoff if we're not paying attention. You can't really tell how high the clouds are looking at it from the ground, and things can change rapidly from the time you get in the airplane until you actually take off. So it's just a little quick video of his experience and some really bad jokes.
This man had a farm.
Yep.
And this lady went to visit the animals and look at the animals. And she went up to him and she had a question, and she wanted to know why that cow right there didn't have any horns. And he said, well, I'll explain to you how that comes about. He said, an Angus or a whiteface are bred that way. They don't have horns. He said sometimes milk cows will have horns, and after they've been milked a few years, they get kind of nervous and jumpy, and so they cut the horns off, right, so they won't get injured. And he said some of them, when they're calves and not very old, they put acid right there where the horn's supposed to come out, and that stops them from growing. But now, the question you asked, why don't this cow have horns, is because it's a horse. So that's the end of that.
That would explain why, I'm not much good on animals, but horses don't have the horns, I guess.
They do not have horns, no.
Yeah, so Dick, I've developed a new method for counting animals out in the field. A lot of times a farmer will need to know how many head of cattle he's got out there, or horses or whatever. So if it's a really full field, that represents a problem. I mean, how do you count them out there? So I've developed a new technique that I think is going to be really good. What I do is I just count the legs only, and then I divide by 4.
Right.
And that will give me a super accurate estimation of what it is. It's actually,
that would work good, yes.
Yeah. So anyway, I do a lot of stuff with animals, mostly sheep, but I can't really talk about that right now.
That's over there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I've decided that I'm not going public with any of that stuff anymore. That's like the last.
Maybe a little late.
Yeah. I did have one thing that I wanted to ask you about, though.
Okay.
Now, you've been a pilot for a long time, and you've been an avionics guy, worked on airliners and avionics, but you also fly a whole bunch of general aviation stuff.
Yes.
And you started to tell me a story the other day where you just plumb got near almost severely killed. So yes, tell me that story. I think it happened right here. But what was you doing, and how did that happen?
Okay, I was leaving on a Saturday morning,
yeah,
to go to Williamson for their Saturday morning breakfast. And when I came up here and looked, it was broken, but it wasn't cloudy. I could see the other end of the runway.
Yeah. And
so when I left, and
you left going south.
Yes, that's the way we leave, is going south.
Okay.
And
how long's your runway?
2,900 feet.
So you had probably at least a half-mile visibility, right?
Oh, it was more than that.
More than that? Okay.
Yes. Yeah, I could see the trees at the end of where the ground rises.
Mile visibility, that's VFR, isn't it?
It was VFR.
All right.
No, I don't leave if it's not.
Right, okay.
But it didn't last long.
Okay.
I got about 200 to 300 feet high.
Right.
And in the vicinity of the lake at the end.
Right.
And I encountered thick fog.
Right.
And it completely obliterated the windshield. I couldn't see the cowling or the prop or anything else.
Yeah.
And I looked out the side and I could see glimpses of the ground.
Yeah.
So I started a right turn, and I was watching the ground, and I turned about 90 degrees.
Right.
And nothing was improving.
Right.
So I I had visions in my head of what could happen.
Right.
So I made myself come back inside, and I rolled the wings level, and I climbed about 200 feet a minute.
Yeah.
And about 4 minutes later, maybe 5 minutes later, I broke out into the clear,
Yeah.
going to the west.
So you initially had the urge to look outside and look at the ground and try to fix it by looking outside.
Tried to get out of it by looking at the ground, but it was moving.
But then all of a sudden you had a thought, probably from your previous training and previous avionics, you used to work on attitude indicators. You knew to get back inside and quit paying attention to the ground.
Yes, yes. I became nervous at that time.
You became very nervous.
Very,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, I have to tell you, this is probably, I've done a lot of interviews and a lot of video stuff. This is the first time I have ever gotten to interview a dead guy.
Well, okay.
Because you shouldn't be here right now.
Well,
You know where you ought to be?
yeah, and over there.
You ought to be piled a half mile off the end of that runway, nose down in the ground at 160 knots.
Yeah.
That's where that airplane should have ended up.
Yeah, but
Most people would have fought to stay visual and not fought to get back inside.
Right.
So you get a little gold star for that
Okay.
one for knowing to go back inside, and that's an important aspect of what we're trying to get a little bit more awareness onto. That's a category. What you just did is called unintentional IMC after takeoff, and it can happen at day or night. You didn't intend to go IMC and didn't know that you were about to do it. Walking out here and taking a look, it looked like it was doable, but as soon as you rotate up into it, now you figure out what the real problem is.
yes.
And now let me ask you one other question. Once you went into the clouds and set that 200 foot per minute climb, going straight, wings level, were you legal or illegal? You were illegal.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely, you were
Yes.
illegal.
But I could use the E word,
Yeah, yeah.
but
You
I
see,
didn't have to.
You didn't have to,
Right.
but you did what you had to do. You don't have to declare an emergency to get the emergency authority.
Right.
You recognized what had happened, and yes, you were illegal in going into the clouds, but you're alive today. So, of the two, which one's better?
Yes. Today.
Today.
Is better. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Legal
And-
or not.
Little or not. Now, what's the odds of you bumping into an airliner out here 40 miles away from Atlanta, rotating off of this airport, climbing 600 feet through fog? What's the odds of you bumping into somebody else out there?
None.
0.
Yes.
Yeah. So
There's-
I'd say you did the right thing. And this, I'm going to write this down in my journal. This is the first time I've ever got to talk to a dead guy. I mean, this is crazy.
Yeah. Well, I told myself I didn't want to die today,
Yeah.
so that put me back in there.
Yeah. Well, that's a great story, and I'm totally glad that you had the presence of mind to think to get back inside that airplane, because
Yeah.
most guys don't. Now let's get back to the sheep.
You can have all the sheep.